The House comes now to questions for oral answer. Question number 1, in the name of Mckelvie.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question to the Minister of Finance. What reports has he received showing New Zealand households are using rising incomes to save more and pay down debt faster?
Honourable Bill English.
The Household Economic Survey for the year ended June 2014 shows that New Zealand households are paying down mortgages faster, with a 14.8% increase in mortgage principal repayments in the 2 years to June. These faster principal repayments explain most of the increase in weekly mortgage costs. New Zealand households have been paying down debt since early 2009, and debt servicing costs as a share of household income are now 38% below the peak in September 2008, reflecting a sharp fall in interest rates. As I said last week, national accounts data shows New Zealand household savings rates have now been positive for 5 consecutive years, the first time this has happened since 1994.
Supplementary question, Mckelvie.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How much have average incomes and wages increased for New Zealand households over the past 2 years, and what is driving this?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, according to the survey, in the last 2 years to June 2014, there was an average overall increase in average incomes and wages for households of 9.1%. This is driven by a combination of more people in the labour force, more hours worked and wage increases. Wage and salaries were 7% higher over those 2 years, and driven in part by a higher minimum wage and increases in New Zealand super. This compares to inflation of 2.3% in the 2 years to June. That is, wages and salaries 7% higher, inflation 2.3% in the 2 years to June.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Given the Minister's detailed knowledge of the survey, can he say whether it shows that housing costs are rising faster than incomes?
Honourable Bill
Mr
English.
Speaker, I think it does show that, which is why the government is taking an assertive approach to ensuring more land supply in our metropolitan markets, and also a reform of our state housing sector to provide more social and affordable housing. Housing costs have been rising faster than income for about 20 years, been one of the principal drivers of inequality in New Zealand, and this government is setting out to change that.
Speaker.
Supplementary question, Mckelvie.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How do increases in incomes and wages for New Zealand families and households compare to the cost of housing?
Well, Mr Speaker.
Order. Honourable Bill English.
Statistics New Zealand reports that total housing costs increased from $256 per week to $284 per week in the 2 years to June, or 11%. By comparison, average annual household incomes increased $141 per week before tax. Higher household costs were driven in part by higher council rates, interest rates rising off 50-year lows, and higher average weekly rental payments, up $17 to $290 per week. The report notes that more than 1 in 3 households that rent spend over 30% of their incomes on housing costs. This is part of a long-run trend in which people on lower incomes are seeing housing costs consuming an increasing proportion of their income. That is why the government has set about, starting 3 years ago, to change our planning system, to change our housing supply, to change the regulation of our housing markets, and to change state housing, because we must turn round this 30-year trend.
Order. Supplementary question, Mckelvie.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What steps is the government taking to support further income and wage growth and limit increases in the cost of living?
Honourable Bill
Mr
English.
Speaker, the government is following the example of New Zealand households by committing to a responsible management of its expenditure, maintaining a path to surplus and paying down debt. This helps to keep interest rates lower for longer, takes pressure off the exchange rate and supports business investment and job growth. Our goal is to maintain moderate growth through this economic cycle, and we're on track to achieve this with projected economic growth of 2 to 3% over the next 4 years. In the last year there were 72,000 more jobs, and average wage growth of 2.3% was ahead of inflation at 1%.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Is it correct that the Household Economic Survey shows that the average household incomes of the bottom 20% grew by 2.9% in the past year, and that of the top 20% grew by 14.7% in the past year? And doesn't this demonstrate that inequality is widening in New Zealand under his watch?
Order. Order. Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, no. No, it doesn't. Well, I invite the member to look at the child poverty monitor that was published yesterday or today, which shows a number of measures of income distribution, all of which have slightly improved in the last couple of years. So it's simply not correct to say that income inequality is getting worse. In fact, it's getting mildly better.
Worst it's ever been.
Question number 2.